listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast where we introduce you to the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. Before we jump into this episode, we'd like to give special thanks to POP, peopleofplay.com, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Without them, this podcast would not be possible. Hello, you are listening to Hidden Roll, the podcast that introduces you to the brains behind your favorite toys and games. I am artist, engineer, and game inventor David Yakos.
And I'm Branson Faustini,
the master of disguise.
Now, there are lots of podcasts out there that talk about toys and games news, reviews, and gameplay. But we want to go behind the scenes and talk to the people who actually make toys and games.
Yeah, we want to ask those questions of, where did this idea come from?
How do they make it real?
And, what's next? And how has this changed your life? And we have a treat for you today. I would like to welcome Ren Guyer. He's down in sunny Florida. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here, David.
Yeah. So Ren comes from the background of, there's not too many people, I guess, that can say, hey, I've changed the entire world through play. And Ren was one of those people. Back in 1967, he invented a game you may have heard of called Twister. Followed in 1969, again, another world changer with Nerf, the Nerf ball that hit the industry, changing life as we know it. Other things going on with co-founded the Windsor Learning System in 91 that helps kids with dyslexia and continue to invent, play, and inspire kids through media. So again, thank you so much for joining us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice to be here. One other task that I have taken on in my life was to start a music company down in Nashville called Wren Music. And we happen to have 3 country music songs of the year acquired by between 1987 and now. And so it's been a lot of fun. My daughter Ree runs it and doing very well.
Oh my gosh.
That's awesome.
It's just the Renaissance, the modern Renaissance, man, that kind of crosses the different areas. Awesome.
That's cool.
Well, it's been fun. I enjoy doing it and love starting things.
What were you like as a kid? Let's jump right in.
Yeah.
I was extraordinarily ordinary. My academic career was like being the pebble rolling along the bottom of the stream. I was usually very close to the dumbest in the class. I was fortunately pretty good at athletics, but I was very small. I did have some successes in golf and sailing that were very helpful to me, that gave me some confidence. And I think actually, as I look back on it, I was for about 3 years as a kid, up until I was 16, I would win half the races in a 40-boat fleet, and I didn't know why I was as good as I was. And as I look back on it, I think my dyslexia had something to do with it. I think it gave me a chance to trust my intuition, because I was not able to remember things like the history book I read the night before. Half of it was there in the morning. So things like sailing and golf, where I was pretty good, sometimes better than pretty good. And I think it was very helpful to have those successes as a dyslexia as a dyslexic kid.
Yeah, so in the 40s, 50s, dyslexia wasn't really popularized or in the sense recognized like in schools really at that point yet.
Well,
So,
my wife and I have 5 children, and Mary and I, as it turns out, Mary was reading all of the texts to our 15-year-old daughter, Lisa. And someone said, well, you ought to have, you should have Lisa tested at the University of Minnesota. And they did a test, and they came back and sat us down in a chair and said, well, Lisa has dyslexia. And we said, well, what's that? And they explained the traits and the conditions of being dyslexic. And we said, well, what's so unusual about that? That's the way life is. That's the way life is for us. It turns out Mary and I both are very dyslexic. And as a result, all of our kids had to be remediated and successfully remediated. Thank the world for that.
It definitely gives a little bit of a different outlook. I've kind of gone through the same thing with my son, and retroactively sort of discovering my childhood in the same way. But it's you definitely have the tendency to develop some different workarounds, I guess, when you're working through.
You don't realize it, I don't think, but you do find ways to sneak around the corners and somehow in another way get it done. That's right. I agree with you, David.
So as a kid, were there certain things you played with outside of the sports and the sailing? Certain games that kind of drew you in?
No, the only little vignette of that sort would be that I did when we were all in winters in Minnesota when we were playing Monopoly, because that's what you did indoors. I decided that there ought to be one route down the middle of the board that had 8 new squares on it. That the middle square was receive $2,000 cash, but around it were all sorts of not promising results. And it was fun. And if you were desperate near the end of the game with nothing to lose, we would all give it a shot to go for that 2,000. With very little success, of course, because the odds were not in the favor of the risker.
So you pretty much had like Las Vegas in the middle of the middle of the Monopoly board, where you're going to put everything on red. That's pretty wild. Pretty wild.
You think? Do you think you had any idea that you were going to become an inventor at that point? When did you first kind of realize that was your path?
I had no idea. Throughout my college career, I was doing the same kind of thing, kind of ducking under the barriers that were in front of me. And I ended up as an English major with an intent to be a writer. And as for my major credit, honors credits, I was writing short stories, and they allowed me to use those stories and work with an author who was in the English department, and thereby got my most of my honors credits that way. And so I presumed that when I left college, I would be a writer. It didn't turn out that way. Should I keep going?
Yeah, it's coming from a dyslexic childhood to wanting to be a writer was definitely a good turn.
Well, I will continue that story because the way it goes is my father, 6 months before I graduated from college, had started a design company that it was two things. It was designing new packaging in paper cartons, which he, in his previous job that he had pulled away from, he had been vice president of product development for a paper company. And he had over 120 patents with his name and other people's names on it for paper carton packaging. This was, of course, in the 40s and 50s, and plastic wasn't at that point, or was just being dreamed of. Mm. And so most of the packaging was paper carton, and my father decided to pull away and see if he could develop cartons or packages for other people. He also knew that he could design in-store displays for Fortune 500 companies. You see them at the end of end aisles. They are cardboard displays that display the product, the chosen product. And he knew how to design them and have them manufactured. And that was a skill that I back up a little bit. He enticed me into, he said, just try it. Just try coming with me. And I said, well, all right. And it was a little bit of a come down because I had presumed most of my friends who were graduating were being conscripted by Fortune 500 companies and paid very attractive starting salaries. Mm-hmm. And my father put me at the bottom of the barrel and went along with some of the fledgling artists that he had hired. He had some good artists on the staff too. And so I sat at a drawing board for a couple of years and tried to absorb what the skills and the tricks of putting together and inventing in-store displays. And I got pretty good at that, and then ended up seeing that the company needed more sales. And so I struck out to try to find Fortune 500 companies that weren't in the Twin Cities. And so I was off and running around the Midwest to Chicago, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Racine, Wisconsin, etc. And that's what brought me to be a designer, as it were. And I did absorb some of the methods by which the artists in our studio were using, and a lot of it back then was tracing paper. You would find a subject that was close to what you wanted, and you would trace that and then put it in what was known as an artograph, and that would blow it up, make it larger or smaller. And I would go home at night, and to practice my drawing skills, I would take the tracing pad and put a visual that I wanted to draw. And I realized very quickly that if you trace the dark spots and you get the shapes of all the dark spots in the illustration, all of a sudden you pull the paper away and there you have something that looks like the illustration you were just copying, as it were. And I have subsequently gone on to be an artist, and but that's not the subject of this conversation.
But it speaks into it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That artistic ability, that design, that recognizing design, and even the understanding of manufacturing and what it takes to make a product really do speak into the inventive process.
Yeah.
Well, it was helpful.
Let's maybe get into Twister a little bit.
I can't imagine a world without some of those classics.
I know.
Well, to give you the Twister story, I had been somewhat disillusioned or disappointed by some of the promises that our business held, because we were designing these displays and we'd get the order and we'd make the displays and send them up, and the next thing you know, next year, they come back and say, well, what are you going to do for us this year? And there was no residual opportunity. It was every year we have to reinvent the wheel. And the model, the business model of the whole concept of the company was bothering me. And so I kept looking for other ways to take the company somewhere, since I was working with my father and for him at that time. As it turned out, my father's well-being was somewhat impaired, and when my mother died, he lost a little bit of interest, and so I kind of stepped forward and took a position with the company of ownership of a little over half the company, to see if I could just put the energy into it. And I also was looking for new ideas at the same time, that we could take the company towards something new and different. And one of my odd or off-center result was to do an idea called Pizza in the Round. The idea was, at that point in time, in the 1962 or 3, there was a thing called the radar oven, which is, as we know, it's the microwaves, and there was one in the city of in the Twin Cities at the Minneapolis Tribune Cafe. And I found a lady who's she and her husband had a bar in St. Paul, and they froze their pizza dough and then brought it out and thawed it and heated it. So I presumed if you could have frozen dough and somebody, a whole pad, a pizza slice, not slice, but a whole pizza, and a pizza crust. And if someone pulls up at the takeout center and orders their pizza, you can put whatever you want on that pizza, put it in quotes, radar range, and maybe you'll have a pizza. So we tried that and went over we did all the steps you would presume you'd take. And it just didn't quite come out the way we thought it would. And I began to realize that I, at the same time, knew nothing about the food and beverage industry, nor did I know anything about franchising. And I quickly, even though I had an architect, a really top architect in the Twin Cities, I talked him into designing a building that looked very much like a barber pole type poles around it, looking very Venetian, or at least we thought so. And so we got that far along, and fortunately I pulled away from that prospect. But that was the kind of thing I was looking for, something different, something that was unusual. The pizzas were coming in from the East Coast and hadn't quite arrived. There were only 2 pizza parlors in all of the Twin Cities at that time. So I had the dreams of reinventing the pizza business. Fortunately, I got out of that that dream, if you will.
There's no Papa Wrens.
But I did keep going on this Twister idea. At one point I was trying to figure out, I had a client who had shoe polish, and we were designing a shoe polish display for them. Oddly, shoe polish. You think, what do you mean shoe polish? How do you shoe polish sneakers? The kids are wearing. But back then, there were white shoe polish was a need. At least some mothers felt there was, and to put on their kids fancy shoes. And I was trying to dream up something that would be, in addition to the display we were developing, we could do what is known as a self-liquidating premium, which is, in essence, it is, if you take the label off and send $1 in, you will get something. And everybody knows that used to be a very popular way of promoting products. And I was sitting at my desk, my drawing table, and trying to figure what could we make that would be cheap, that kids would relate to kids and feet and shoes, and I thought, well, let's see if there was a pad, maybe a cardboard pad with squares on it, and kids tried to walk around on it, and I thought, I honestly at that point said, time out, and I went into the reason I said time out was this, I believe, was a idea that had quite a bit a larger opportunity. So I went in the bullpen where all the artists are, and I took out a large piece of corrugated board that we used for making display materials, and I drew 1 foot squares. I did 6 1-foot squares one way and 4 squares the other way, which gave me 24 1-foot squares. And then I got some ribbons, and there was a blue team, a green team, a red team, and a yellow team. And there were teams of 2. And the idea that I dreamed up at that moment was, well, let's see, if you start at a diagonal corner, the idea would be that when in your turn, when you move, you tried to get to the other diagonal corner before other teams got to their other opposite corner. And so that meant that I had conscripted at this point some of the artists and some of the ladies from the accounting and front desk. And so there were 8 of us on the board. And this, of course, does give you a bit of a crowd. And so I was trying to organize, okay, it's your turn. Yeah, the blue is trying to move. You get to move 1 square. Nobody cared about whether they moved 1 square or 2 squares. The game collapsed in chaos because everybody was laughing so hard. And I thought, time out. Wait, there's something going on here that has not gone on historically, and we're having too much fun. So I went subsequently, over the next month or 2, I designed a game that was on a plastic mat that had squares, that had, the object was, there were 2-man teams, 2-person teams, pardon me. And the object was to have one team, since if you were standing on the board, if you could get all 4 of your legs or feet, as it were, in a row on the board, it would be, in other words, a tic-tac-toe concept. And it played well. It still would play well. And it isn't that we haven't shown it to the people we should show it to. and I took it to 3M, who had a lovely set of, not a set, but a collection of board games, as it were, that you play on the tables. And they're unique, and they're very well designed and very well conceived. And they looked at it for some time and said, you know, Ren, this is a lot of fun, and we're having a great time testing it. But it's our shtick, if you will, is we have intellectually challenging games, and this is not. And we were calling it King's Footsie or something like that. And so I had this game with the cover and King's Footsie. And a fellow by the name of Chuck Foley. Chuck Foley was a printing salesman was a printing salesman that was talking to our purchasing agent. And the game happened to be in the same office that they were discussing. And then Foley said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, that's a game Ren had invented." He said, "Really?" And so he said, "Can I talk to Ren?" And so it turned out that Chuck Foley had worked for a game company in Minneapolis and was apparently at that point not with that game company, but he professed to have some knowledge of the game toy industry. So we talked some more, and it turned as the result of that was I hired Foley and a guy named a gentleman by the name of Neil Ravens, and the three of us formed a team. And the reason I was able to do this was that my father saw the fun that we were having testing the footsie game, the King's footsie game, and he saw that this was people being the players was something interesting. So he underwrote it and said, "Okay, I'll pay for this team for 2 years." And so the three of us went to work. We ultimately designed 8 ideas that had people as the players. To their great credit, Foley had the idea of putting the colors that we had, the 4 colors that we had, and they were circles, in a row as they're presently seen on the twister board. And Raven said, "Well, why don't we get on the board with our hands and feet?" Both ideas were excellent. So the three of us had come up with this game and 7 others that were pretty good games. And Foley said he had heard and he knew of a gentleman at Milton Bradley by the name of Mel Taft. And Foley and I went out to see Mel Taft and showed him the 8 ideas we had. Mel took to the one we called Pretzel, which had the colors in a row and you got down on the floor. As it turned out, the legal department at Milton Bradley discovered there was a conflict with the name Pretzel. And so they said, we're going to call it Twister. And I thought, oh no, I'm from the Midwest. And anytime you say Twister, you're thinking of tornadoes ripping across the Midwest. This is not a good idea. Anyway, all of this was proceeding with an enjoyable way. They were going to bring it out. They had all of the advertising done and all of the ads shot. And Mel called me about 5 days before Christmas. Said, "Ren, our very top level retailer has told us that they are not going to put it in their line, and this has ended up being a point of damage for the game in our system, and we're going to drop it. And we're going to pull all the TV ads that we bought, and we're backing off of this." And that was a disappointing Christmas, as you might imagine. Mm-hmm. And it was in the spring, I think right about April or March, that Mel Taft, who was by this time a pretty good friend. We had made some very decent and attractive concessions to each other for in all of our contractual relations. So Mel and I were doing very well. And Mel, in his, knew that he had paid a PR company to see if they can get the Twister game on the Johnny Carson show. And sure enough, Mel and the PR lady were in the audience on the night when Johnny had as his guest the gorgeous Ava Gabor in a somewhat low-cut gown, enticing Johnny onto the mat, and that was it. There were people lined up at a retailer in New York that hadn't sent the games back yet. And as you can imagine, the management of Milton Bradley did change their minds, and on it went. It went to be game. It was the game of the year, and all of those fun things.
I can't imagine having a game like that shows up on, what a debut to have that show up on Johnny Carson, and it was Ava Gabor like playing that, and suddenly lines around the block. Because that, you're looking at a time in culture where just being in proximity with the opposite sex in that close of a space was a little bit of a faux pas, but somehow you gave permission to do that through what was Footsie, then Pretzel, now Twister. Like, tell us about that.
Well, that has been the mixed standard for Twister, and perhaps one of the reasons it stays as a fascinating game, because kids love playing it, and it's a center for a lot of birthday parties still. Not still, always, at least since its inception. And there are people who have come up to me often, not often, but have often enough, who have said that their early encounters in their early adult years or late teenage years were very helpful in promoting a new relationship, should we put it that way? And so it's kind of it's a mixed bag, but that's part of the fascination, I think.
Sure, just brilliant, and it. You're one of those people that have had the ability to not only recognize opportunity, but execute on those ideas, not once, but multiple times. I can't imagine a world without Nerf. It's Nerf or nothing. You wouldn't believe the amount of Nerf that's just in my house alone with my 4 kids. And it's, but again, the world had shifted because of another question, another idea. Can you tell us about the inception of the Nerf ball, and like, how did that come about?
Well, subsequent to the success that our company had with the Twister game, I made a life decision that the prospect of the company that my father had started and I was running, the long-term possibilities for that were not great. However, it did have the Twister flow, if you will, to support it a little bit. And so I said to my father, I think I'm going to start another company. And I'll put the offices in the same building that I had bought, actually, for our company. And there was plenty of room in this old warehouse. And I pulled back and hired a couple of his artists who wanted to come with me, and a couple of other people that I knew were talented. And we put together a 5-person team. And we went to work daily trying to invent toys and games. And it was going pretty slowly. Things were jumping up at us, as you might imagine. It's not from scratch. It's not easy to come up with new concepts. One of our designers at one point decided that he was going to design a game where kids would go around on a big circle of pieces of flat, just sheets of plastic or paper that looked like rocks, and you put them in a big circle. And then everybody had a little bit of script or money, if you will. And then if you wanted to, you could hide your script underneath the rock. And then if somebody else was going to try to steal that while you weren't looking, and so that was the essence of the game. And in order to keep people from stealing the money that you had hid under a rock, the idea was to have another rock. And so the designer, back then, foam was used for protecting packaging in transit, and that was it. And so there was a piece of black foam that they cut a bunch of squares out of, or squares in different shapes out of, and everybody had 3 of those little rocks. And so we were marching around, and it was an awful game, and it was no fun, and no prospect. But the ethic that I promote and was promoting back then is, and will always be, I guess, do not ever say, oh, no, that's a lousy idea. Let's not test that. Because I know, and I have seen, and I will get to talking about this a little later, I think that's what you'd like. If you're working on something and it isn't working, the number of times that you come up with something else that has real possibilities is absolutely amazing. So the secret is do. And in this case, we were doing, even though we all knew going into it that the game was not good. It was dumb. But at one point in the testing process, one of the designers, Will Cruz, started bouncing these balls, or they were rocks, black rough cut rocks, over a net. And we stopped, all of us, right there. And time out, that's it. And we, quickly thereafter, all went to our desks and found pieces of foam and cut them into, first of all, cut them into little round balls of different sizes, all different sizes. And then, as a result, having talked with people in the foam business who were selling foam padding, they said, well, we know the way we cut our foam is with hot wire. And if you take a hot wire and you have a rod going up like this, and then you have a half a circle, if you twist that circle, you come out with a ball. And so we made a few of those, and we made them different sizes, and we developed about, once again, we figured you can't sell a ball, and just a ball. So we developed a whole bunch of games, and indoor games, and all sorts of baseball and basketball and everything you could think of to do with balls indoors or outdoors, tennis, everything, ping pong, pong. And we took it to Milton Bradley, the ideas, and they said, we really like this, but unfortunately, Mel Taft again said, we are a game and puzzle company. We are not a toy company. And we this one. And so pass they did, and we packed up and took everything back and called Parker Brothers. Parker Brothers said, well, yeah, come on out. You had success with Twister, blah, blah. And so we went out to show Parker Brothers the idea. And they said, well, good, let us keep some of these things. Called me back, probably 2 months later, and said, well, I tell you what we're going to do. With your consent, Ren, we're going to put the ball in a box and sell it. And we said, no, don't do that. You're never going to sell a ball in a box. Well, they came out with it, and they called it Nerf. I'll answer the why Nerf answer right now, because one of the designers one of the people in design that was working for Parker Brothers knew that the foam padding on the roll bars of Jeeps in the desert were called Nerfing him. And so that's why there are all sorts of other ideas about why it's Nerf, but that apparently is the answer. Anyway, they did. They came out with a little tiny box with a little tiny foam ball in it. And that was the beginning of the Nerf line. Subsequent to that, as you know, we've gone through every sporting task you can think of, and thereafter gone into any foam projectile that assumingly will not harm anybody and can be a shot or propelled or thrown in any way indoors. In other words, we broke a rule, which is important to do with the new product, no throwing balls in the house.
Just like going back to Twister for a second, again, you broke that rule of you're not supposed to be very close to each other in that pretzel-y form. With Eva Gabor and Johnny Carson, that's what sold it. And then again, I can hear my mom right now just stop throwing balls in the house. But you made that possible for the entire world, and now it's one of the largest global brands in the play space.
It's doing well.
Amazing. I really like what you said about your an idea that's not working, leading to more ideas as a source of creation. Basically, it's a good piece of advice.
Well, and you've seen this. I have a book called Right Brain Red out that I have outlined basically 5 ideas that have helped me. If it's appropriate now, I could suggest those.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. Yeah, Right Brain Red, wonderful book, and if you haven't read that, definitely get it. But we'd love a little bit of a peek into some of that process for or the inventive spirit and that creative mind.
Unfortunately, the title leads people nowhere. If we had said the guy who did has 5 ideas for you for your creative, building a creative team, I think we might have sold some books. But this was unfortunately our publisher's idea, and it's okay. You know, it doesn't make much difference. But I do believe these 5. When I give a speech, this is what I talk about. It's like, don't do it yourself. Some few in history have done it themselves, but even they have always had someone else with another skill at some level pushing and helping and making it happen. It doesn't happen alone. Nothing comes out of it alone. The concept and the basic idea is always good, but you need to have a team around your creative process.
In my great example where you had that with even with Twister,
Yep.
one of your teammates coming up with the colors and the other with the hands.
Team. Yeah, a 3-person team, but the team would not have been successful without my father underwriting the project, A, and B, without Mel Taft supporting it internally. I mean, it takes a lot of people for a product to get to the market. But in my experience, teams of anything up to 5 are pretty compact and are very good at sharing ideas and trying not to claim the idea, just sharing ideas. As soon as you get over 5, something very strange happens. And I think it's, for me, I call it the committee process. As soon as you get into committees, and I've been on a lot of committees, a lot larger than 5, and I've never seen committee come up with something that's really genuinely creative. So let's say that you have a team of anywhere from 2 to 5, and another hoped for, and actually we encourage and do have our team get accustomed to saying, what happens if? Not what if. What if starts kids' magic stories. What if there was a land where? No, this is what happens if. And then you're forced to deal with what happens before we launch this product, what happens with the manufacturing, what happens with the marketing, what happens with the follow-up, blah, blah, blah. What happens if we try such and such? It's a very helpful phrase. And I've had people come up to me who have heard my speech or they read the book and say, oh my God, does that ever work? And that is very gratifying when that happens. But, and let's say that the team does, in their estimation, come up with an idea, or even tries an idea and tests something. My hope is for that team is they do not talk it to death. In other words, if you have an idea that appears to have a lot of merit, maybe not perfect, but a lot of merit, go and make one. Do it. Make it happen. Make a model that you can test. If it's a product, the closest to making one, the better off you'll be. And if it's a restaurant idea, make it in miniature. But don't sit around at the table and talk yourself out of it. And I have been at those meetings where we have talked ourselves out of it. At one point in time, one of our teams, one of the gentlemen on the team kept saying, you know, what's really in right now is trivia. And so we said, well, go ahead and, Ed Hollahan was his name. He's a wonderful game developer. And Eddie said, hey, okay, I'll make a model and we'll see what happens. And he made the model, and it had these cards, and it had trivia questions on it, and on the back there were answers to the trivia questions, and then he did a research on the cost of the cards, and said, we looked at it and said, well, the cost of the cards is so much that the game would have to sell for almost twice the price of any known game on the market. And number two, if you've used a card, everybody will remember the answer to that card, and that card is useless. So now, good idea, Ed. And we didn't do anything about that. But the boys who developed Trivia Pursuit did, and they did pretty well.
Yeah.
So if the lesson being, don't talk yourself out of it. Go and make one.
Nice.
And having made one, if you're really lucky, really lucky, the result may be that you're breaking a rule, as we have in some of our current products on the market.
I love that, breaking a rule. Those have become inspirational words for me as a game inventor since you told me that, I don't know, years ago. Like, I often am asking, am I breaking a rule? The engineering part of me wants to make sure I'm staying within the lines, but the creative aspect is definitely go out there and break that rule. So currently you continue to develop, more toys and games. You've changed the world of play through games and projectiles with Twister and Nerf. You've helped kids with dyslexia through learning remediation in reading and spelling through the Sunday system, like a lot of these different things. But currently you've got another project going right now. It's with my friend Wren. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with that and how you're reaching kids?
Well, it goes back to, let's see. I have always kind of fiddled around with writing songs, and that's what got me into starting a publishing company, in Nashville called Ren Song. And if you're a publisher in Nashville, it means you have writers and you represent those writers, and they're under contract. And when they write a song, then you go out and you get that song on somebody's album or record. And in that way, you are participating in the money that flows from the record and the song. So we were doing this. Ree and I were running this company. My daughter Ree, and a gentleman by the name of Jeff Harrington decided that he didn't want to write. He was out in L.A. and writing music, and he did not want to raise his family in L.A. So he decided to come to Nashville, and he got a job with Warner Brothers, a publishing company. And but he and Rhea and I became pretty good friends. And finally, he said, "No, I think I'm going to work for Wren Song and not Windsor. Not Warner Brothers." So Jeff came on the team, and he and I would spend time together talking. And what do you really want to write? I said, well, I've got a bunch of kids' stories and songs, and they're started, but I need to put them to music, and I need, I need to cooperate with someone in order to bring these alive. So he and I started doing that back in the late 60s. No. It would have been in the middle 80s. I'm sorry. And you just witnessed dyslexia and it working at its best there.
Well, it allows us to connect things that I think other people don't sometimes. That's all right.
And so Jeff and I started putting together these songs and stories, and we ultimately ended up with 6 they were video, not video, they were tapes. Back when you stuck a tape in a machine and it played a little cassette tape. And we put together 6 albums of kids' music and songs, and we called it Curly Lasagna. I sang them all and narrated all the stories and songs. And Jeff put them to music, and we had them produced and put them out as Curly Lasagna's car tapes. Did Curly Lasagna's car tapes take over the children's music world? No. We did, however, sell a few. And I still have parents, 50-year-old parents coming up to me and say, Ren, where is Curly Lasagna? I grew up with Curly Lasagna, listening to it in my car with my mom when we were going someplace. And so we've had these songs and stories, and I've been subsequently writing more and over the years. So about 3 years ago, Jeff and I decided that we were going to take some of those and see if we could tighten them up a little bit. And then I got in touch with, or I hired some of the artists, some artists who are represented by the Kid Shannon group in New York. And I worked with those artists to do the illustration of the story or song. So then that means we have the audio that I sing or narrate, and we have the art of the song, and then we got a videographer, Todd Overnote, and he made the videos from the pictures that we had done, and then put the audio in, and so we are ending up with a video of the stories and songs that I had originally written, and Jeff had mostly put to music. what do we do with it? We went to a group that had had a great success with introducing a new product. I won't get into any names on this, but they were enormously successful with it. And I figured these guys know what they're doing. We're going to see what they can do with a product we can call My Friend Wren, W-R-E-N, not R-E-Y-N. And so we put them to work on this. And they decided that they looked at the market and they decided what we needed to do was make some kids material that was, all I can say was about the same as the current kids material. When you go online, that's what you see. And finally, after about a year of watching them trying to get this up and develop this new site, it was like, no, wait a minute. Where are the songs and stories that we started with? Where's the My Friend Wren songs and stories? And, oh, well, we'll get to that. No, but we've got to do this first. And anyway, we went through a year of that, and I finally said, time out. This is not working. Fortunately, there were a couple of people who had been a part of this development with this group. And I said, is it possible that we can just take the stories and songs that Jeff and I and the artists and Todd, and we have these products, and we put them up online, and we call it My Friend Wren. And so from that point on, that was about a year ago, we started developing it. And about about 2 years ago, we started developing that and getting all the art ready and blah, blah. About a year ago, almost to the day, it being in June of 2021, we have put up the site, and it has far exceeded our predictions and our plans. It's going beautifully, and we're having a lot of fun with it. It seems like it could work. We're not sure yet, but the concept that we're working on is that there is room for a gentle, more intelligent, more accepting, not a fast and jerky, quick, show the kids this and then move on to something fast. These are gentle, quiet stories and songs that kids and parents, we hope, will watch together, but that in the way that you go back and read a story with your child, or the child goes back and looks at the story or song, we think, and the numbers are starting to support this possibility, that there is room in the kids' market for something that's a little gentler. If you think Mr. Rogers,
versus like SpongeBob SquarePants, which is very like kind of in your face, a little bit loud and manic.
That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Yep. And whether or not there's room for this kind of thing now, the jury's still out. We have a ways to go, but our numbers, our views, and our subscribers are way beyond what we had even projected for our first year. So we're having fun with it. And we would encourage anybody, especially those with kids between actually 3 and 6, 7, 8. We have a broad range of stories and songs that hopefully will resonate. We'll see.
And that YouTube channel is My Friend Ren, WREN.
Or www.myfriendwren.com. That's the site.
That's awesome. Well, I look forward to sharing that with my 5-year-old.
There you
And
go.
well, this has been just wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing these stories.
Of course.
Everything from childhood dyslexia, how Nerf got its name, like to just even best practice for creatives alike. Thank you for the time. And again, where's the best place for somebody to follow besides My Friend Ren on YouTube? Is there other places where?
Well, I do have a website, which is just renguyer.com. But I would strongly encourage anybody listening to go to the YouTube site of My Friend Wren, WREN.
Right. And again,
Thank you for
so
that.
much for the time.
Thank you so much.
And
Yeah.
just keep on playing games.
This has been Hidden Roll, the brains behind your favorite toys, games, and all things play. If you like what we're doing, the best way that you can support us is to like, thumbs up, comment, or leave a review and share us with your favorite brains. Follow Hidden Roll Podcast anywhere that podcasts can be found. If you want to see our beautiful faces, all of our content is also available to watch on YouTube. If you know of someone who would be a great fit to appear in our podcast, or if you'd like to learn the story behind any toy or game, let us know on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send us an inquiry at www.hiddenrollpodcast.com/suggestions. That's Hidden Roll, ROLE, podcast.com. Once again, special thanks to Pop, People of Play, the one-stop hub for all toy and game inventors. Visit www.peopleofplay.com to learn more. This podcast is also made possible by the continued support of the brains who never grew up, inventors of play, Streamline Design. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.